Julia. And for our last speaker, we're going to have another remote talk. So Basile Pinsard is online. Adina's going to hook him up. Sorry, I forgot to grab the bio. So Basile is a data scientist at the Montreal Geriatrics Institute. Maybe some people know the acronym. I have no idea why this is the acronym for that, but CRIUGM. The letters don't seem to match up. But where he manages neuroinformatics for the MRI unit and the Courtois NeuroMod project acquisition and data management. So we're going to watch a pre-recorded talk and then take questions live after.
I'm a somewhat data engineer based at Montreal Geriatric Institute. Today, I will describe a work-in-progress platform for research data operation and how we envision to embed it into an open science framework. So now we call it BIDS-flux as it focuses on neuroimaging and the brain imaging data standard, but that's still in flux. A bit of history to understand where it started. So around the end of my PhD, I got hired by Lynn to work on a project of deeply sampled neuroimaging acquisition for AI called CNeuroMod. The goal was to collect a large amount of functional MRI data on many tasks, including novel and engaging ones such as video games. Over the past 7 years, we've been on continuous data production, like designing and coding tasks, deploying these in the MRI, gathering about 15 hours of fMRI per week, and processing data for students and community to use it. We are clearly building the plane while flying, but we are lucky to operate in a relatively small research center where we can agilely try to improve operation. In particular, because I'm also working for the UNEF neuroimaging platform managing its site infrastructure. So for the setup, we have MRI and other instruments on top, biopack physiology, custom eye tracking, and of course the task with their behavioral data. Ignore the imaging part for which we have no data yet, but stay tuned. So from these instrument-specific data, we wanted to convert to not one, but many modular raw datasets following the BIDS standard, and then generate a bunch of derivatives through standard pipeline. BIDS apps such as SMRI prep, fMRI prep, or GLM contrast, and whatnot. These have obvious dependency to the raw BIDS data, but also between derivatives. So how could we manage a spaghetti of dataset without losing too much of our sanity? Well, obviously, Datalad. In 2018, Yoda approach was fresh out of Datalad land, and great, we can link submodule for provenance, we can use Datalad container to run pipeline, we push to Git hosting and some buckets to store data, and thanks to Datalad and BIDS, we're pretty much checking all the fair data checkbox. Easy, right? Well, that's still a large number of manually launched scripts, and data transfer and checking that stuff are correct, yada yada yada. It was barely manageable at the pace of NeuroMod acquisition and with dedicated staff. So it brings the question of scalability to other research studies. And through the MRI unit operation, we observe that in most other labs, psych students are busy with participant recruitment and experiment and often check their data like 3 years down the road. And then you realize all what possibly went wrong or not. And multiple students will then suboptimally convert and run pipeline on that study to get to their end result, which is like publication. And if they are brave enough to want to make the data reusable and share it, well, they have to reassemble that mess, and in most cases, that won't happen, and the data dies on some external hard drive. Well, obviously, we would rather do that continuously, automatically, fairly, and provide expertise and services to empower other researchers with open science practices. Well, open science ain't easy, right? People want to do open science and data sharing, but that's a good amount of additional work. I drafted a life cycle of data collection with best effort steps for open and responsible human neuroscience, and it's likely missing some stuff. From the experimental point of view, this includes mandatory data management plan when applying for grants. If you get funded, you have to set governance around sovereignty constraints with ethics, then plan the study operation, acquire pilot data on each instrument, then comes real collection. We need to log and track data collection, reliably get data from instruments. Instruments can be an MRI or web forms. And we also need to store and back up the data on something reliable, like servers. Next, you want to prepare the data, aggregate instrument data, follow latest standards for data organization, anonymize, review quality and compliance, and then process it with some pipelines to be ready for analysis. After that, data can be shared internally, externally with different access schemes, from fully open to DTAs and the like. Finally, long-term preservation, that's an important step. So you might do that in a single site or in a multi-site study, adding multiple folds of complexity. And finally, the data user, that can be the experimenter too, will likely pull data from one or multiple studies, run analysis, and go on the amazing journey toward publication. Here again, reproducible data tracking and computation, such as Datalad, containers, version code, and notebooks can be leveraged. We can see that there are many different tasks and expertise which can be way too high a burden for a small app to handle. All that calls for framework and infrastructure to support major scientific operation. So fast forward to 2023, this maturity model preprint came out, and this was pretty much my face when I read it. At that stage, NeuroMod was quite streamlined. The team was collaborating on Datalad repos through issues and pull requests. I was venturing into automating tests on datasets, just as BIDS-validation and checking file presence in its bucket. So in terms of maturity, CNeuroMod is maybe an old teenager, not bad, but still gotta grow up. So as we wanted to expand this process outside of NeuroMod to the whole MRI unit users, automated data operation or data ops was clearly the next logical step. So what the heck is data ops? Well, very similarly to DevOps' role in software development, it adopts a number of practices to automate most of the repetitive stuff, do granular control version of the data, but also monitor the operation and data quality. And through all that process, keep the human in the loop with a collaboration environment. All that for the final goal to release data frequently to other users and other softwares for faster data to insight. Wait, so DataOps is DevOps for data, and we host Datalad dataset on a DevOps platform, so we're doing DataOps. A DevOps platform is a Git-aware orchestration tool where humans and automated process interweave. So, and there's a number of security mechanisms ensuring that software are securely developed and deployed. We can apply that to collection of data repos with the added layer of git-annex data and metadata separation. As we want self-hosting, we first went with Gitlab, as it has some nice nesting features to organize repos, but it's kind of heavy maintenance. We are exploring more open and lightweight options, notably for Hero, but not necessarily with the AnnexR version developed here, as data separation can also be a feature. So if we manage data as code, each data sample, for instance, an MRI session, is a feature to be added to the dataset, with a dedicated branch with multiple commits for conversion, metadata configuration, but also data operations such as anonymization, like a defacing of MRI images. We just zero out non-brain part of the images with facial features. Each of these features branch get reviewed in a separate pull request to a dev branch. We also have a parallel stream for piloting, so one can quickly get quality control and derivative on pilot data to evaluate design, with the final pilot setting up specs for automated testing. Then we can also release data as code. A release branch can be forked from the dev branch with a pull request to the main branch. Once merge that pull request, a tag is created and could trigger other actions, like pushing to a public Git or storage remote, or indexing on another platform, or generate a DOI for that dataset version. But it's not a single repo. To be scalable, we want things to be modular, and thus add multi-repo CI interaction. For instance, we want MRI QC repo to be triggered when a raw BIDS new sample is under review to help the reviewer. And when that sample has been merged, we want to trigger downstream derivatives such as fMRI prep. Each of these tools generate a new branch and pull request for the new sample that get cascaded down this graph of pipelines and dataset with interleaved human review. We could think that in the future, peers that pass this advanced battery of tests could get merged automatically and only problematic one get reviewed. So for one study, we get a collection of dataset, and through super dataset, in some modules, we can automatically generate alternative views and of the study more toward like usage. So zooming out on that approach, we want data operations to not only flow forward, but also test, provide feedback to the data collection process. Similarly to DevOps, where you have linting tests, typing tests, data ops can take the form of sets of special tools and test suites that assess the data quality and conformance to research protocols, so that specific actors can remediate to detected issues quickly. So for example, the test needs that emerge quickly is that checking that what we scan is what we planned, which documents the bit sample should contain and which parameters are the correct one. So we developed a small tools that rely on JSON schema validation and with some extension for the BIDS format. So the spec is generated during the pilot phase of the study, and then new sample are checked against that spec. You get a green check or a red X in the PR with a detailed report. Similarly to software development, as one identifies new potential threat to the data quality, sometimes through painful experience, we can implement a new test as a standalone tool, generic and flexible, and then embed them in the CI workflow. So going back to that schema, we have analysis ready data that machine and humans have made their best job to up the quality, and we can continue the open science journey. So the end user will likely Datalad install and get data, run some complex stuff like not in a container without versioning and back to the mess to get to publish. It's kind of a waste. What could we do to help on these last long miles of the scientific marathon? I think we could help lower barriers for more reproducible science. For example, from that structured data, we can bootstrap Datalad managed project with data source provenance. And we also can provide containerized computational environments such as Jupyter Hub, which are compatible with reproducible scientific communication platforms such as NeuroLibre, preprint server, or 2I2C or CurveNote and other type of technology like that. And so we could get an end-to-end reproducible science framework where from the publication you can get back to raw data and get all the history in between. Well, to add the F in FAIR, we also want to help the experimenter to index their metadata or push their data to specialized or generic discovery, dissemination, and preservation platforms, such as NeuroBagel, OpenNeuro, or Borealis, which is a pan-Canadian dataverse infrastructure. This can be flexible to accommodate different local data governance and sovereignty constraints. Finally, BIDS and Datalad are file-based, but for machine learning experts, like big arrays and labels are more convenient. So we can plug extractors as a last step in that cascade of pipelines to export vectors, embeddings, labels, and whatnot to ML operation platform, either for training models with batches from dataset release, or providing fast prediction on the new data samples. This could also push dataset to ML distribution platforms such as Hugging Face. Well, everything is connected, that's perfect. Well, nothing is also connected, like the data ops that I described here is only local. And so what about multi-site study and multi-site collaboration? So about 3 years ago, Lynn was like, hey, I'm a co-PI on that multi-site pediatric imaging platform, CPIP, and they got funded. So now you can work on that too. Yay! Well, Git is distributed, so can be data ops. Multiple local nodes can contribute to the same dataset. However, we are navigating a heterogeneous landscape of data sharing, data privacy, and data sovereignty in Canada. And the current situation with our southern neighbor has heightened interest for sovereign data, compute, and AI infrastructure. So with all that in mind, our vision revolves around decentralized nodes that rely on local sovereignty resources at each institution. Then federation of metadata and potentially sharing of less sensitive synthetic or aggregated data enables federated analysis, similarly to what the Enigma consortium is doing. So to conclude, we think that Datalad can empower distributed data hubs on file-based standards such as BID, and open science practices even on restricted data by flexibly adapting to heterogeneous data sovereignty and governance. And also, on top of that, can help to track scientific endeavor end-to-end and enable meta-science analysis of it. So in short, what we want to develop is a glue that interfaces data tracked operation on a local CI orchestration platforms, and all that connected to a lightweight federation infrastructure. As we define the data pipelines, we also want to enrich the ecosystem with more tools that operate on Datalad, BIDS, or other file-based data standards. Finally, the overarching goal is to reduce barriers and friction in the adoption of open science practices through institutional support and cross-institution interoperability. Thanks for your attention.